This is a Film Stories original podcast.
Mother's Day is almost here, and you can get her the most beautiful time-tested gift around. A watch she can wear every day from Movement. Whether mom's into classic dress watches, rare and refined ceramics, or tried and true bestsellers, Movement has something she'll love. And right now you can save big on the best Mother's Day gift ever with up to 50% off site-wide during Movement's Mother's Day sale at mvmt.com. Again, that's up to 50% off at mvmt.com.
We made this.
Hello and welcome to the Xcast. The truth is in here. This is our special Fight the Future Minute podcast. Today I'm Russ Hugo, and I'm going to start that again, sorry. This is our special Fight the Future Minute podcast. I'm Russ Hugo, and today I'm joined by Deana Ferreri. How's it going?
Hey, Russ. It's going good.
All right. And thanks for joining me. Today we're going to be talking about minute 43. Since this is our first minute on Fight the Future, kind of just get our overall impressions out there about the film and our history with it. So maybe to start, when did you first see it and what are your thoughts on the film?
I actually don't remember when I first saw it because I actually started watching the show midway through the 6th season. So the movie had already happened. And I was looking up like the VHS release date and the DVD release date, like trying to remember when I don't remember. So I think it was probably sometime around February or March of 1999, because that was when I started watching. And my friend Katie, who was also a Xcast patron, we were roommates in college, and she got me into the show, and so I'm sure she had the VHS, and we watched it, but I don't remember.
And what are your thoughts about the film now that you're more well-versed in the X-Files?
Yeah, now, I mean, for me, it just feels like, it just feels like part of the mythology. You know, it's a little different because, you know, it's bigger, the music is bigger, it, like, feels sort of more urgent, but it just sort of, I like it about as much as I like a lot of the other mythology episodes. Like, for me, it goes a little bit downhill after the whole bee sting thing. Like, some stuff starts not making sense. Like, how did Scully only has this bee in her collar by chance. How are they so ready to go get her in the ambulance? I don't know. The whole thing doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And then they weren't going to kill Mulder, and then they were going to kill Mulder. And the whole, like, Mulder action hero thing is just, like, not really my favorite, but the first half of the movie I really, really like. I don't know. What about you? Did you see it in the theater?
I did. This is, and I think I've talked about this before, and I don't mean to come out swinging as a heretic, but my opinion of the film is fairly low. I originally started watching X-Files with season 1, started with Deep Throat, and then probably around season 2 or 3 I got very busy with work and wasn't able to religiously watch the show or anything, but I dipped in and out. And then when Fight the Future came out in the theaters, I went to go see it, and it pretty much turned me off of watching the X-Files, and I didn't watch anymore until long, long later. I watched Millennium and then went back to X-Files through Millennium. So I think it does a lot of things well. I'm not going to begrudge it that, but what I enjoy about the mythology, or what I did enjoy about it, was either two issues, mystery or cultural, historical analogs and dealing with things. Like a lot of the stuff Darren Mooney and Chris Knowles bring up about the traumatic and horrible past of colonialism and things like this. And the film is very much a piece of the 90s popcorn film with a lot of set pieces, and it's fun, but I have a threshold for how many coincidences I can take and still be in the narrative and go along for the ride. And the film has so many narrative conveniences in addition to the action stuff that it's hard for me to just sit there and enjoy, because it's just a little I know it's a science fiction film, I know that, but it's a little too unrealistic for the X-Files, if that makes any sort of sense.
Yeah, I think it does. I think that's sort of what I was attempting to say, but wasn't really accomplishing saying is like, yeah, I think you're right. I think it's way too unrealistic even for the X-Files. And I have wondered whether I would have felt differently about it if I was a fan at the time and went to see it in the theater. Like if I would have had expectations of it that would not have been met. And your whole point too about all of the sort of aftermath of the Cold War themes that you get in a lot of mythology, that is really missing here, which I never really thought about.
Yeah, just there isn't much of really anything that wasn't already dealt with by the show. So I mean, you could say maybe it's talking a little bit about domestic terrorism or something. Maybe it's talking about petrodollars. I don't know. But even if it was repeating itself, that'd be fine as long as it went into some degree of depth. But instead, I think it just has to try to keep the pace up so much. So many of the set pieces, it becomes a little tiring for me, where it starts off, they get in a situation where most likely they wouldn't be able to get out of. So what do? They just cut to the next scene. And the first few times, that's fine. But there's so many scenes where Mulder would be dead, and he should be dead, and wouldn't be able to physically accomplish anything. Even going back to the beginning, it starts off with a really good scene, a tense scene, and it works well, where they're looking for the bomb. What are the odds end up in that room getting the cola from that machine?
Yes.
Yeah, and then that kind of a convenience, that's what I'm sort of talking about, the convenience keeps repeating over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And then the second thing about the mystery, the fact that it pretty much just erases any of the mystery. This is something Darren Mooney was talking about in the recent Redux podcast, which may not be recent by the time this is released, but that it's now, we pretty much know everything about the mythology. We know everything. We know all the actors in general, and the only thing we don't know is why they make some illogical decisions. So if they have so much power, why can't they just shut down the X-Files? If this is the big turnaround at the end, like, oh no, they've restarted it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's almost it's almost an anticlimactic scene there where the Smoking Man is handing that telegram to Strughold, and it's like, oh, the X-Files were reopened, and yeah, like you said, well, can't they just shut them down? And the conveniences, yeah, like Scully conveniently has a bee in her shirt. Like, and
how long?
Conveniently there for about a day and a half. I don't know, for like hours and hours, and they're just ready for it. They're ready for her to get stung so they can show up with the ambulance. Like, that just always really bothers me.
And the fact that bee was so, maybe it was agitated, I get it, but they also ran through 1,000 bees that were probably very agitated as well and didn't get stung once. And then this one is so likely to sting them. It's that sort of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I'm with you on that.
I think the problem was the expectations of what the X-Files should be versus if I was going to go in and just expect this is Independence Day mixed with like Deep Impact or something, and it's just a summer popcorn film.
Yeah.
Fine. You can just have fun. It's no big deal. We can have a protagonist who's already been shot in the head, gone through however many hours in freezing cold, slides down this metal thing at full speed and manages to hold on to a wet thing one-armed and pull themselves back up. Sure.
Yes, and climb all the way back up.
Yes, carrying someone.
Someone.
Yeah. Over 100 pounds. And then, they just, how do they get back? They just do. They don't die of hypothermia or lose any limbs. It's like, oh, okay.
Okay.
The other thing is the score. It's very hit or miss for me as well. Some of the score is fabulous, and some of it is so 90s over-the-top action film where they're really trying to punch up for the jump scares and the action stuff. But the slower parts where Mark Snow was able to capitalize on the orchestra and the rest, I think really works well, and I think a lot of that stuff was brought into the series later. What are your thoughts just in general about the look, the feel, and the score? I
like all that. I think to me it just, like, it looks like an episode of The X-Files, but just, like, a little bit more. And I always enjoyed that part of it. The score is a little bit it's just more, I don't know music very well, but it's just bigger, and I like all that.
Let's transition to, we're talking about minute 44, which started at 43 minutes and ends at 43:59. The minute begins at 43 when Scully first begins the autopsy, and then ends at 43:59 when Scully is now hiding in the icebox.
I really like that this was my first minute because there's a bunch of like classic X-Files things in here. You have Scully doing an autopsy. The minute ends with Scully's phone ringing, and you hear, "Scully, it's me." They're somewhere they're not supposed to be. And then after bringing Scully someplace that they're not supposed to be, Mulder says, "Okay, go do this autopsy," and just walks away. It's just a lot of that's just a lot of stuff that's just like inherent in the show. So the autopsy is kind of cool because we've just seen, I think a couple minutes ago, we've just seen the bodies, which are like all sort of gelatinous. Like, I think they really did a good job of making them look like they were being like eaten away from the inside. And you see Scully pull out this hunk of bone that just looks like sort of brittle plastic. Yeah, I like the visuals of the autopsy a lot.
I agree. I like the sound also when it's coming up over the body into the chest cavity, and she's got the big scissors, and it's very effectively classic, disgusting X-Files autopsy scene.
Yeah, definitely.
But I think it works well for just building the atmosphere.
Yeah, definitely. And then I start to toward the end of the minute, the guard who had been standing sort of at the front entrance when they came in, and who Mulder sort of like talked his way into getting in. So he comes in looking for Scully, and I'm just thinking, I feel really bad for this guy. He's in a lot of trouble for letting them in here.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It's not going to end well, but the film still does a good job of framing him as the bad guy.
Yeah, that's probably true.
So he's just doing his job, but it's hard to sympathize with the way they frame it in his face.
Yeah.
So he's doing a good job being a menace. So kudos to the actor. They come in, and all of a sudden Scully's gone and slips into the icebox. And this is a part where I thought the score was particularly good. So we got another sneaky scene. And any more thoughts?
Another part I really do enjoy is when her phone rings. She does this like heroic flip of the lab coat to get to the phone as soon as possible, which I just sort of find, I don't want to say amusing, but like it's pretty cool.
It is.
Yeah.
Good point. Well, thanks. And this was our coverage of minute 44 of X-Files Fight the Future. So until our next minute, remember as always, trust no one.
Previously on the We Made This Network. By projection light.
Dickinson also brings the audience's attention to a then unknown Audrey, who shines like a bright, pure beacon the whole film. It's quite amazing to think that only a year after this film, she would be cast in the film that would catapult her to superstardom and garner her an Oscar win. But it's also not difficult to believe. Her performance is so unaffected, as if she's living the part of Nora, which, as I've said, she almost had already. And it's also wonderful to see her dance, particularly during the audition scene towards the start of the film, where she flits and spins like an angel. It made me think of how she had danced during the war for audiences who were not allowed to clap due to the prohibition of public gatherings, but how she brought joy to those people as she brings joy to everyone who's watching this film every time she dances.
Don't say the C word.
Sex, drugs and rock and roll isn't a cliche. I've seen it all. There's a unique group of groupies that feel the need to collect, if that's the right term to use, like all of the band members, as in to sleep with all the band members and all of the crew.
Oh, wow. So they kind of, do they work their way from the top down, or do they work their way from the bottom up?
Yeah, get to whoever they can first. And it would always be me and one of the band members they'd never get. And I was quite proud of that. I was like, yeah, I'm the one that you don't know about. So like, you can never brag. I'm not a bragging right.
That's pretty admirable. And is there a particular reason why you're not going to shag the groupies?
At the time, I was a virgin, and I didn't want my first time to be with just some random lady on the road.
Bloody hell, that really is admirable. I think I'd have thrown my virginity at anybody, to be honest with you.
It got to the point a few years on, I was like, I'm thinking about it now. But no.
The Time Is Now, a Millennium podcast.
The way that he's offered that job, I think he's done that before. It's not out of character for him to go into situations like that. I know he's done a bit more, with a bit more levity earlier in the season in Goodbye Charlie, where he goes to speak to the social worker and he lays off all of his problems, which is a great scene in that episode.
Yeah, it's very hard to have that sort of levity when you're dealing with literal Nazis, to be fair.
Well, it's a slightly different take on the same kind of.
Yeah, I'm wondering whether the Mel Brooks sequence of that would probably be something to behold.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.